the results chain: inputs, outputs, induced outputs, specific objectives, overall objectives. There's a big difference is that we have the direct outputs and the induced outputs. So there's a split of the outputs. Why are we splitting the outputs? The outputs is what is under the control, okay, of who is implementing. Now here we just said that we have two key partners in implementation. One is the Commission and the other one is government. And this is the reason behind the split of the outputs. Because something is under the control of the Commission and something is under the control of the government. And to emphasize this concept of control, we have the split. So, inputs, what are the inputs? Financial transfers, policy dialogue, performance assessment, disbursement conditions, capacity development. These inputs have to come together. So you cannot have a budget support program where you only have the transfer of funds. You cannot have budget support program without policy dialogue or without the performance assessment and the disbursement conditions, and complementary support, which now here has been exemplified as capacity development, but it can also take other forms, more complex forms. So financial transfers, what are these? These are funds allocated to the program to then be transferred to the National Treasury upon achievement of agreed disbursement conditions. So these are the disbursement conditions. So you cannot have one without the other. It's not that you give money freely just because, okay? You have the set of mutually agreed conditions. What are these? These are conditions to be met in order to trigger the disbursement. We classify them under the inputs as they are part of the dialogue framework, and they define the financial incentive mechanisms. Policy dialogue between the partner country, the public institutions, and the other stakeholders, and the EU. Why is this important? Because it allows the Commission to sit down and discuss with the partner country and to some extent help the shaping of the reform it wants to implement. And then complementary support. External support, very often this takes the form of a sort of separate contract to provide technical or institutional support, complementary to the main budget support operation. Direct outputs. What are the direct outputs? There's something which is under the control of the Commission in this case. And they are the country opportunities that are expected to improve as a direct consequence of the deployment of budget support inputs. You see, we don't have the activities anymore. We shift directly to outputs. What are these? These could be new fiscal space because there will be money flowing in. Or it could be the operational structure of dialogue and its functioning, because again, we said policy dialogue is a key element of budget support. And some of you could argue, for example, that dialogue starts before the actual implementation, and that's absolutely right. And in this case, the case study we're looking at, we have that this is a second or maybe a third phase of the program supporting public administration reform. And what are the induced outputs? These are the expected improvements in the partners' public policies and related legal and regulatory framework, public sector spending, public sector delivery. If we think about all the discussion we just had on whether the revision of legislation was an output, whether it was an outcome, and we apply it to this case, it would be an induced output. Why? Because it is under the control of the government. And the government in this case becomes a key actor in implementation. Outcomes, the outcomes are the changes resulting from the induced outputs being applied. Use of services, confidence of socioeconomic actors, performance of public institutions. In the case of budget support, the specific objectives, the outcomes are a change in behavior or a change in status, a positive expected change. And then the impact, the expected mid and long-term changes leading to the achievement of the country's strategic goals. Now, there's this important difference, if you want, that the budget support is very much linked to a government strategy. All programs should somehow be linked to what is going on in the context of the country to the sectoral strategies, sectoral policies, and so on. But in the case of budget support, it's compulsory. If you do not have a sector strategy, a sector policy, a reform program going on, you cannot have budget support.